You know, in 1957, another politician came to Bedford, and that politician was the Conservative Prime Minister, Harold Macmillan. And he came and gave a speech just across the river from here to celebrate Britain's economic success. And he talked about the new jobs, higher wages, greater opportunities that people had had after the Second World War. And the speech became known as the speech where he declared, "You've never had it so good." Now, today in Bedford and today in Britain, things feel very different. Small business people, including many people gathered here, are working harder than ever before. People are working harder than ever before. But for far too many, wages are falling and prices are rising, and they feel worse off, not better off. Far from feeling they've never had it so good, millions of people in Britain think, are we going to ever have it so good again? And the question that people ask me is, how are we going to turn this around? And that's what I've come to Bedford to talk about. Because I think it starts with a truth that we have forgotten as a country. That economic recovery will be made by the many, not just by a few at the top. Britain needs great, successful, big business leaders. It needs them to feel rewarded and supported. But they know better than anyone that they can't succeed on their own. It's only when working people have confidence and security, when everyone's sons and daughters have the chances to get the skills they need, when enterprising small businesses can flourish and succeed, and when together we build world-class services, that our country can prosper. And you know, that's not a Labour idea or a Conservative idea. It's a British idea. And it's what I want to talk to you about today. Previous generations knew the truth. Our economic success depends on the success of working people. In the Industrial Revolution, it wasn't just the mill owners and the factory bosses who drove our economy forward. It was the people who went down the mines, who spun the cotton, who built the bridges. They were the people responsible for our economic success. And you know, many of our world-leading engineers and inventors, they didn't come from wealthy families. They came from ordinary backgrounds. People like Thomas Telford, the great engineer, and Robert Stephenson, the inventor of the railway. And in the 19th century, Britain improved housing, built proper sanitation, ensured good working conditions, not just because it was fair, but because it was essential for our economy to succeed. Our country knew that economic success was made by the many, not just a few at the top. And you know that here in Bedford better than anyone. Because just down the road from here is the Stuartby Brickworks. And from the Industrial Revolution to the 20th century, that gave jobs to thousands of people. The bricks the people of Bedford made constructed the houses that they and so many others lived in. And it was the good wages that they earned that made it possible for them to afford to buy their homes. Economic success was built with the hands of working people, but it was only sustained through the pockets of working people because they could afford to buy those homes. And Britain knew this lesson too after the Second World War. We all know the history. We built great new public services to improve people's lives. An improved state education system, and of course the National Health Service. But the NHS and free education didn't just do that, they strengthened our economy as well. I think of my dad, who came to Britain as an immigrant and learned English at Acton Technical College. He was part of that generation for whom the post-war world was built and who built the post-war world. It was only possible because Britain knew that a healthy, educated workforce was vital to our economic success. But you know, somewhere along the way, we forgot that lesson as a country. That a successful economy is made by the many, not just the few. And that's the lesson that we've got to relearn if we're going to succeed in the years ahead. Because people here know the truth. Right across Britain, people are putting in the hours, doing the shifts as never before. But something has changed over the last few years. There's less chance of promotion, less chance of a pay rise. Prices just go up and up and up. Petrol for the car, tickets for the train, childcare for the kids, deposits for a first home. The squeezed middle has never been so squeezed. And the bad news is that if we carry on as we are, things won't get better. Now, why are we in this position? Well, it's no wonder our economy isn't growing when people can't afford to buy the goods and services that they're producing and selling. And then think too about the skills of working people that we need for our economy to succeed. Young people here in this training centre are getting absolutely fantastic help thanks to the Bedford Training Group. But so many young people across Britain aren't getting that help. And every time a young person with ambition and talent can't get on, it isn't just bad for them, it's bad for our economy as well. Some of you today, who are here today, run small businesses. Your businesses are vital to the future of our economy. But today, many small businesses across Britain just don't have the orders to keep them growing, hiring and investing. And all they hear from the banks are promises about a better tomorrow. But tomorrow never seems to come. You know better than anyone that every time someone has a great idea but is held back, that's not just bad for them, that's bad for our country as a whole. So today, Britain's economy is just not working for working people. And that's why it's not working for Britain. It's no mystery as to why we're in the trouble we're in. Now let me say this. The squeeze on working people, the squeeze on living standards didn't just start in the last couple of years. It has deep roots. If you look over the last 3 decades or so, less than 15 pence of every additional pound that Britain has earned has gone to the lowest 50% of earners in our country, while 24 pence in every pound has gone to the top 1% of earners, people right at the top. The last Labour government took action to change this. Labour helped families with the minimum wage and tax credits. It made a difference, but it wasn't enough. The problem now is that things are getting worse, not better. The government promised change, but change isn't coming. They are cutting taxes for one group in society this April, the very richest in society. Believe it or not, this April, people earning over £1 million a year will get an average tax cut of £100,000. Now, don't get me wrong. We need very successful entrepreneurs in Britain, making profits, being rewarded. But we just can't succeed as a country, hoping wealth will trickle down from those at the top to everybody else. Our economy won't turn around that way. That's why it's not right to be cutting taxes for the very richest when everyone else is seeing their living standards squeezed. You know, somebody said to me recently, this government seems to be the first in our history to believe you can base a whole economic strategy on the misery rather than the success of the working people of the country. At the same time as cutting taxes for the richest, they're cutting the tax credits that make work pay for millions of people. They take the side of the train companies, the energy companies, the petrol companies, while we pay more for train tickets, energy bills, and more fuel for the car. David Cameron, the Prime Minister, talks about a global race. And it is essential, and you know this here, that we compete with China and India and others. But let me just level with you. Britain won't win a race to the bottom. We won't win a race by saying we want to compete on the basis of low skills and low wages. That is not the way our country is going to succeed in the future. And you know this here better than anyone. But it's why you're working so hard to provide people with the training they need to get on in the world. So what are we offered at the moment? The promise of wealth trickling down from the top, a squeeze on the middle, and a race to the bottom in skills and wages. There's a better way than that. And if you need to know why we need a better way, look what's happened over the last 2.5 years. We were promised, remember this promise, we were promised that we could have growth and a lower deficit. In fact, we've had almost no growth, and the deficit is rising again. That's because people aren't in work paying taxes, they're out of work on benefits. And what's worse, this approach can't work for our country, because we will only build prosperity when everyone plays their part. And to do that, we need a new one-nation strategy for the British economy. The starting point is where I started, that the recovery will be made by the many, not just by a few. We cannot go on with an approach that simply promises more of the same, year after year of squeezed living standards for the majority of working people. It's wrong for them, and it's wrong for our economy. Ed Balls and I have said we should start with a temporary cut in value-added tax as part of our 5-point plan, cancelling the millionaires' tax cut and not cutting tax credits this April for working people. The approach we need is not just different, though, from this government, it's different from the last. After the next election, there will be less money around. We know we will inherit a high deficit and face difficult choices. But we have also learnt from this government that without a plan for growth, a plan for the deficit will fail. And it is different choices and new priorities that will turn our economy round. That means starting by protecting the incomes of working people with new priorities in taxation, and I want to talk about those today. A one-nation Labour government led by me will put a fairer tax system at the heart of its new priorities. It's a crucial part of how we build an economy where everyone can play their part. A one-nation Labour budget next month would lay the foundations for a recovery made by the many, not just a few at the top of society. And let me tell you about one crucial choice we would make, which is different from this government and different from the last government. We would tax houses worth over £2 million, and we would use the money to cut taxes for working people. We would put right a mistake made by Gordon Brown and the last Labour government. We would use the money raised by a mansion tax to reintroduce a lower 10p starting rate of tax, with the size of the band depending on the amount raised. This would benefit 25 million basic rate taxpayers. And it would move Labour on from the past and put Labour where it should always have been, on the side of working people. It shows our priority to do everything we can to make a difference to people's living standards, and it sends a message about how Britain is going to succeed in the years ahead, that when you play your part, when you make your contribution to our economy, you will be rewarded, and that Britain's economic success will be built by the many. That is why Ed Balls and I want a 10p tax rate and a mansion tax in government. We've rightly said that we will only set out our tax and spending commitments at the next general election. That is the way a responsible opposition should conduct itself. However, this is a clear signal about the priority we attach to a fairer tax system and to the living standards of working people in Britain. We would also be making different choices between the most powerful in our society and ordinary working families. We know the truth. Working people are paying more than they should, from energy to credit. And that's why a Labour government would take action, to break the stranglehold of the big six energy suppliers, stop the train companies ripping people off on the most popular routes, introduce new rules to stop unfair bank charges and cap interest on payday loans. All part of a plan for a one-nation economy. But it's only the beginning. The biggest changes Britain need will come from economic reform. Let me say something about skills, and this is the right place to say it. You all know Britain needs to have the best skilled workforce in the world if we're going to compete. The Industrial Revolution that our country led was built on the skills of the best workers in the world. In more recent decades, Britain's universities have given us some of the world's greatest scientists and innovators. But here's the truth. We still lag well behind our competitors in productivity. Not because we don't work hard either. We do. We work longer hours than many of our competitors, yet still have lower productivity. I think that's for one particular reason. Because we're not doing enough to get the best out of everyone. In particular, the 50% of young people who don't go to university. It's from the apprentices we have here today and the apprentices we need across the country that the next wave of productivity and growth must come from. We need nothing short of a revolution in vocational education and apprenticeships. Of course, I want young people from all backgrounds to be able to aspire to go to university. But I also want young people who are awarded an apprenticeship to know that Britain values you. That means our country has to change. We must end the culture which says university is always best and vocational education is somehow second best. It simply isn't true. That's why One Nation Labour will create a new technical baccalaureate to complement A-levels. So at the age of 14, you know what you're aiming for, you know what you're aspiring to, whether you're going down an academic or a vocational route in school, college, or in the world of work. It will give employers the control of money for training for the first time, so that young people are trained in the skills they need in the future, and we need more places like we have here which connect up to employers and make sure that they're getting the skills they need. And we will demand that Britain's employers step up too, because they must play their part if we're going to create a one-nation economy. They must offer apprenticeships and training right across the country. And I know that so many great British companies want to play their part in leading this revolution. But one thing that we've learned, particularly since the financial crisis, is that we can't just provide people with the skills and then sit back and expect the right jobs to be there for them automatically. We've got to take an interest in the kind of jobs our economy is creating. Today we're increasingly two nations. High-skill, high-paying jobs for those at the very top, but low-skill, low-paid, long-hours jobs for too many people. That's because over the last 3 decades, we have seen fewer and fewer middle-income jobs in Britain. That's fewer jobs in skilled trades and more jobs paying less with greater insecurity. We've got to turn this round as a country. So a one-nation economy needs to support businesses that create sustainable middle-income jobs. That means a modern industrial policy that supports the sectors that will create jobs of the future, like in the green industries that are so important to our country. An end to the short-termism which prevents many businesses investing too. Let me just give you an example. When takeovers are launched, hedge funds and speculators can buy shares in the company and vote in the takeover bid just to make a fast buck. It's wrong, and it damages good British companies, and a Labour government would stop it happening. And One Nation Labour will also work with companies and workers to encourage a living wage across the country. But we also need to understand another big change in our economy if we're to succeed. Many new jobs in the future will come not from a small number of large businesses, but from a large number of small businesses. So we need a new One Nation strategy for small business. There are more than 3.5 million single-person businesses in Britain right now. People with new skills and new ideas starting out, trying to make a difference, like many people here today. These small businesses need a government that is on their side, a government willing to take on the vested interests wherever they find them, in the public or the private sector. One Nation Labour will be that government. That's why it's One Nation Labour that's been leading the way on banking reform. Labour called last year for real separation between casino and high street banking, so we could return to the great British traditions of banking and maybe turn the word banker from an insult into a compliment. Now, the Chancellor has moved on this issue, but he hasn't moved far enough. He still refuses to put in place a comprehensive power to split the banks by law. We need that in legislation. So if the banking system does not change its culture, we can break the banks up. And new small businesses need something else too. They need opportunities to work together. So a One Nation Labour government would change the way our regional growth funds work. At the moment, all they do too often is prioritise the needs of big business. We'd make them work for small businesses across the country as well. So we could find new ways for businesses to build shared facilities and develop deeper connections with each other, enabling them to start to overcome the challenges they face. Finally, businesses and working people need a whole nation that supports them. In the 19th century, people argued for clean air and sanitation because it was right. But it also allowed people to move to the cities for work and the great new industries to prosper. In the 20th century, the school leaving age went from 11 to 16 in the course of that century. And that was the right thing to do, because it enabled people to do the jobs they couldn't have dreamed of before, but it also helped our economy as well. Now in the 21st century, we've got to remember those lessons. Today, too often, Britain just leaves people on their own. That means too many parents can't work because they can't get the childcare they need. Too many people have to drop out of work when their parents become old or ill because they can't get the social care they need. Too many young people just don't have enough money for a deposit on a first home. That's bad for them and bad for our economy as well. And too many businesses find they can't succeed because they don't have the roads, the rail, the infrastructure to support them. Businesses right across Britain know the truth. They can't solve those problems on their own. None of us on our own are going to be able to build the roads we need, the railways we need, the housing we need. It is only by acting together. And that's the idea at the heart of a one-nation economy. That our recovery will be built by the many, by all of us working together and not just a few at the top. And that's what we're going to fight for between now and the next general election. And this is not just an argument in British politics. This is the argument about where our country goes. It's the big choice that will dominate that election. It's a choice between two different visions of our economy. And let me just lay out the choice for you so it's very clear. There is a Conservative vision. It's a race to the bottom in wages and skills. It's rewarding those at the very top and it's leaving everyone else squeezed. Or there's a One Nation Labour vision. That our economy will only prosper when the vast majority of people in this country prosper too. When working families have confidence and security, when they can invest in the future and when they can start small businesses of their own. This is a high-stakes election that we're going to be facing because I think Britain is at a fork in the road. We can carry on as we are. Falling wages, low growth, failure to tackle the deficit, or Britain can take the path I've outlined. a recovery made by the many, tackling low growth and reducing the deficit, building, not squeezing, the middle, all of us playing our part in turning our economy round. One nation. It's not just a better way to live. It's the only way we can prosper as a country. And it's how Britain has flourished in the past. It's what the Labour government understood in 1945. It's what Harold Macmillan understood when he came to Bedford half a century ago. We can rebuild this country. We can offer people hope. We can make an economy that works for working people. It's a goal worth fighting for, and it's what a one-nation Labour government will do. Thank you very much.